purpose and how we can move purpose into the business model of our companies. So we start by sharing some ideas about purpose, why it's important, which I think is not very hard for you to actually be convinced about, but then also see why is it so difficult to put purpose into companies? It should be obvious, it should be normal, it is not. So let's see and explore some ways in which we can do that. So to get started, I give you some wonderful news. In case you did not know, companies compete. It's just something about the entrepreneurial spirits that there's an innate desire to compete, and we'll flow from competition to collaboration later, but that's an instinct. So you can compete to be the best at something, and I think you're aware about the B Corp movement, and how this competition is a very good one. So it's a competition to be the best for the world. And this competition is for all of you or any of you that have attended any kind of B-Lab events, it's an extremely collaborative competition whereby companies help each other, people help each other to really go forward in an accelerated way. So you really feel supported by this this group of competitors to be the best for the world. And this really, it's a nice phrase, be the best for the world, but if you live it fully, it can determine your purpose, it can determine the kind of decisions that you make, it determines the kind of dialogues that you have, the kind of contracts that you do or you do not sign. So it's not just a nice phrase, it's really a purpose-setting concept. Now, I think if you look at websites of all the companies in the world, everybody's a wonderful company. Everybody's doing everything wonderful for society. But the beautiful thing, as you know, about the B Corp movement is something slightly different. There's a measurement. So it actually tells you how much you're contributing. So purpose is great, but having ways to measure purpose, that usually has evaded us all. But now, thanks to the B Impact Assessment, that showed us how we can really put a number onto it. So you can actually say, I have more purpose than other companies. It's kind of funny because the other day there was an article in Vogue magazine about fashion, sustainable fashion, and they actually had a classification of 10 B Corps who are in fashion, you know, Patagonia, EcoAv, many other companies. And I sent the classification with the number, Patagonia 150, this company is 90, this 80, 81, and so forth. And it's just really interesting because the CEO from EcoAv, 30 seconds later, he replies to me, said, hey, I see we've got 81 points. How can you get more points? So this apparently silly number is actually quite a powerful drive for purpose to become more central to a company. So to me, that's a genius of the original inventors of the B Corp assessment. It's actually a measurement. So below 80, you're making profit, but you're detracting from society. Above 80, you're still making profit, which is a must for a company, not so nice to have. And we actually want to prove that this business model works. It's not just a sweet, nice little desire. So above 80, this is how you're actually contributing to society. So measuring your impact is one fundamental part of having purpose really active within your organization. Now, here's a beautiful quote, and allow me to read it to you. What is your company's core reason for being? Where can you have a unique, positive impact on society? Now, more than ever, you need good answers to these questions. Now, who do you think wrote this quote? What kind of person, what kind of organization, what kind of system wrote it? You might think it's an idealist or it's a social entrepreneur or something like that. Surprisingly enough, but every day less surprising, it actually comes from McKinsey. So McKinsey, as well as many other key consulting firms around the world, really have, in this article, as I said, I've shared the slides. So at any time, you can actually have a look at all the links and everything else. But this article came out back in April, and it's really how purpose is shifting from why to how. Before, and I've been trying to work at this for the last 30 years or so, purpose was not at the forefront of companies. Right now, the McKinseys of this world are saying, purpose it's a given. What we need to shift is from why do I need purpose to how do I implement it? And this is the wave that I'm seeing now, and I'm guessing your interest as well. You know, purpose is important. You want to be driven by purpose, but how can we be better at embedding this purpose into our business model? And this is part of this global culture shift. Why is this occurring now? I think my sense, on the one side, people are really tired of the old system, which is not working for most. So there's a fatigue, there's a demotivation, a lack of spirit on one side. And the other side is some people, some companies that are taking the leadership and saying, hey, hold on a second, we can actually harness the power of business to help address society's greatest challenges. So this is such an empowering statement to have, that nowadays, as McKinsey says, and everybody else says, but I think we know, right, in the deep heart of ourselves, that's the best way to run a business. That's actually what also creates the best results. And so here's one case that I want to share with you, quite a big one, because, you know, it's easy to be purpose-driven in a small little company, tougher at a medium size. Multinationals seem to be really very nice taglines, but really, can you really shift such a big company in a certain direction? As you know, Danone is a B Corp. May I have this statement written down? Danone is not a perfect company. No B Corp is a perfect company. We're talking about approaches that really sincerely, authentically try to live the purposes, not saying, oh, this is perfect, this is exactly the way it's done. So we're using some ideas to then help us to become better leaders, better companies, and go forward. So the first thing, if you go on the website, you can see planet, the whole purpose for Danone to exist. And if you know something about the history of Danone, actually started in Spain, in Catalonia, and the name Danone is Dan Juan, so the son of the owner, called Daniel, had some health problems, and the owner found out that yogurt was actually had health properties. So he started to give his son this yogurt. He said, hey, this is really good, more people should have it. So the origin of Danone, Spanish company, is, and then sold to the French, has been to, from the start, help the health of people. But more broadly, they want to help the planet, and they're fully aware of all the limitations that they have, starting from all the plastic, but they're really driving forward things in this way. They're a B Corp, and for them was really difficult to become a B Corp, and they're a B Corp throughout all their companies, organizations around the world. In fact, Danone Spain was one of the first Danone to certify, and then Malaysia, Australia, all over the world. And so they're aware that in this increasingly complex world, you really need to be working with others to create something more powerful, and being a B Corp is something that gave them that stamp that went forward. They're all very nice, all the statements are wonderful, but what happens when the crisis hits you? And I think we all agree that it's very nice to be purpose-driven and wonderful and values-inspired and so forth, until there's a problem, and then say, okay, yeah, but let me park that for a moment. Let's get to business and see how we can go forward. So The Crunch, this is just one of many articles that appear in the Financial Times. How Danone kept making yogurt in the pandemic is the title. And it just goes on to a number of things that Danone did and how they approached the crisis. But I'll just give you a couple of highlights. So mid-March, okay, this is when the COVID started. And everybody was saying, oh my God, we're going to lose our jobs, everything is going to be a disaster. So the first thing they did is guaranteed all contracts, all wages, at least until June. It was March. It's still guaranteed. They're doing great in terms of respecting contracts and so forth. So I'm looking after you. Healthcare and childcare programs would be extended. There's a crisis. What do you want to do? Cut your costs. Does Danone do that? No. Instead, it's invest more in the healthcare and childcare. So not in just the worker, but also the families of workers. And then a 300 million fund put in place to help fragile suppliers. I mean, Danone does not need to help anybody. It's up to the state, and you would say, or some other entity, to help. But instead, they decide to step up without anybody asking them, and they put up a fund to go forward. Plus, a little bonus that if you work in a factory, you get a little bonus, which if you total all the people, is quite a big amount of money you're investing. So you see the approach here in the middle of a crisis. This is the reaction. nobody asks you to do so much, but you go beyond what your business model is to really live those values. And this is one example of this extra 10 million relief fund. So one of the activities of Danone, they have this this way to bring, they have this startup competition, and some of these startups which need to be working in food, sustainable food and positivity. And by the way, Phoenix is also a B Corp, I just realized, down here. So they do this fund. You would say in the middle of the crisis, let's park this. It's all very nice, but no. Instead, they do a 10 million relief fund for, again, specifically financing three things for these companies. Their people's, not Danone's, their people's health and safety, supply continuity costs, and community initiatives. Again, this is hopefully what many other people can do. But they did not stop there. So I'm not sure if you're aware, and I'm not sure what the Polish situation is, but it would be great to actually have a legal status that will help companies to say, you know, I'm not really a not-for-profit. I'm not really purely a for-profit company. I'm something in between. So around the world, this benefit corporation concept. In Italy, it's called Società Benefit. And Entreprise à Mission is the status in France. And right away, Danone managed, and 99% of shareholders managed to approve this. And what's interesting is, what is this board, the independent committee that you need to set up as an Entreprise à Mission is going to judge you. And you can see the diversity of people, women and men, a very nice diversity. Some are employees, some are scientists, some are UN people, Agenda 2030, Rockefeller Foundation. It's very interesting to see the diversity of people, the chairman of Barilla. So very interesting diversity of people that are being brought together to not just to make sure that Danone follows the right way forward. And one last thing from Danone, coming from Spain, and actually I'm not sure if it's a global initiative or just a Spanish activity, is Alimentando el Cambio, which means feeding the change. Danone is all about food, healthy foods, improving the health of the planet. And what they do here is a series of events, initiatives that help society, the environment, and child. And this is something that's now been boosted and not reduced in the middle of the crisis. Again, you would say, is this a corporation or is this a funding the world kind of organization? So they're having less initial benefits and profits to actually do all these investments, but they're doing them now because I think there's something that's important there. So you can see some of their initiatives, and then I will pause for a moment. Some of their initiatives and how they feel actually interesting, the 5 verticals of B Corps. So the B Corp, the B Impact Assessment manages the sustainability. So they do their providers. So they check providers they looked after. It measures people, how you're looking after your employees. It measures the governance of your organization. Tick, they changed the governance and they became Mission d'Entreprise. They are, this is a sustainability vertical, and definitely they're doing all that they can to improve from the current status. And last but not least is, what are you doing with the community? So these are some ideas of things that work well. And this is what does not work well. And I highlight this one, and you can see this article from the New York Times. So Marriott is part of the Business Roundtable that, you know, made, again, one thing is to have pledges to be a better company, less shareholder focus, more for the people. And it's also interesting because Marriott is a family business. So it's always had some very, very high values. But when the crisis hit, they did 2 things which are very wrong, and you can read the article about it. One is letting everybody go very quickly, and especially in the US, if you let somebody go, they lose all their health benefits. And losing your health benefits in the middle of a pandemic is, you know, is doubly, triply tough. Second thing, what they suggested is to increase the dividend. I sack people and I increase dividends for shareholders, and increase the pay of the CEO. Multi-million payments, we should pay more. So this shows you the incongruence, which is more the typical way of doing business. And right now you can see how starkly this is wrong and going wrong. And this is where the togetherness is really important. So I will stop now, otherwise this becomes too much of a monologue. are there any initial questions now about this approach towards going forward? Beautiful, fantastic. So I see some introductions. Are there some questions right now, something that you want to just highlight or are doubtful about this initial part? And either the chat or the video or whatever is a good one. Randall, your mic is up, so off you go.
Daniel, hi. Thank you so much for that. I was in Paris when this was announced. I think it was in 2016 when Danone began to pull everyone together around this idea to engage with B Corp, and it's just such a great journey. I'd love to hear more about the how on that. So back then, it was around sort of coalescing and around a vision and catalyzing the ideas, and it was quite ambitious around the need to move in that direction. But obviously there would have been some pain points along the way, and they're not there yet. They haven't reached the destination. Could you give a little bit of insight as what are some of the challenges inside Danone in the various business units, perhaps at that level of taking this and making it become real?
Excellent question. I talk as far as I know, so I'll start from the bottom. I work with a number of Danone people, and it's interesting. They've got their WhatsApps and their, it's a personal, it's your phone, and all of them on the WhatsApp, the image, the profile they have is something with Danone on their T-shirt. It's their personal phone. It's not a company phone. So that in itself tells me there's a pride factor within the people working there, which you do not see in other companies. So this is from the basic. The people of the company really got it. Then they're very, very driven by the B impact assessment and the 5 verticals. So I shared with you how the decisions they're taking, they're actually coherent with these 5 verticals. And one of the verticals is obviously the environmental one, and they have a huge problem with plastic. Else. So they're working really hard with a number of companies, organizations to produce. They were the first one to produce these. They're working on it. These 100 recyclable plastic. They're boosting all the education for recycling and so forth. They're working with other organizations. For example, now there's a Food Warriors campaign, which is all about getting rid of waste and really working towards positivity. So they're really driving this forward in a very strong way. The key problem is the middle management. So you have a driven, inspired CEO. They have people around Danone that really got it. They're really passionate what they do. In this large company, like in most large companies, is what I think Emmanuel Faber mentioned as the permafrost. And so there's this layer of directors that say, yeah, I love your mission. Yeah, I love what the people want, but really, I need to get to the shareholder price. I need to get the profit and so forth. So right now, and I know Now Partners is one of the entities that's engaged in this, there's a whole drive to rethink the mindset, not to say this is the new strategy, but rather to change the mindset of these individuals in a way that they will create the strategy that will drive forward and accelerate all the good intentions. So what I observe in every large company is this permafrost layer of directors that say, yes, would be nice, but really, and they're still hanging on to the old paradigm of work, not able to shift away from that. So I'm not sure if there's another. Continue with Nadia, do you have a question?
I do. Thank you for your presentation so far, and thanks, Randall, for your question. My question, in fact, relates to this permafrost layer that you're talking about, because my sense is, and actually it's 2 or 3 questions. So initially, the first question was, how can Danone, who's now leading the agri sector with this whole B Corp, and now they're at 25%, and they're aiming to become 100% by 2025, can really create an ecosystem that accelerates the whole transformation of the sector, and not only their sector, but how, because as we know, things are related, healthcare and so on. How can the Danones of the world today, who are big corps, accelerate this movement? What can be done? So that's first. And the second is, how can organizations with leadership that's still having a problem with this permafrost layer to get them on board and really feel the permission be unleashed to get them with them. Because I feel like, or at least from what I heard from some other leaders, is that they cannot afford to fail, almost like they have to bring that certainty. But we are in a space where it's so ambiguous, so unpredictable, and it's all in fact about prototyping, iterating, going forward, collaborating. It's not, I can't give you like a handbook, although the B Corp has a whole set of things that gives you certainty. The whole mindset that you mentioned is so important. So would love to hear your thought about all these things. Thank you.
The second part of the mindset, that's exactly what we cover in the second part of the presentation. So hopefully there's going to be some hints there. But into the first and part of the second, what I find, the world is not made up of leaders. The world is made up of followers. So what usually happens, especially at the higher level, people are very risk averse. So, you know, it's really amusing, but I'm not sure how it's still there. So I know what the right decision is, but I will not take it. I will ask KPMG to come in to do the whole research and then to do what I wanted to do. And then if it goes wrong, I said, wasn't me, was KPMG. Wasn't me, was make it. So what many leaders do is they hide behind, they're not brave enough to go forwards. But what I am witnessing right now, that they're feeling, you know, either I do or I'm gone. So this feeling, this urgency has never been there before. So I said, I've been trying to change the world and failing for the last 30 years. But this year and a half, I have never had so many requests of coming saying, how do I move forward? And these are the top leadership. That never happened before. Before I had to break into the door to say, you know, purpose may be interesting, may be useful. And now there's a huge shift. Where the big gap is how. And the how is the exciting part where I think all of us are operating. And we are looking and discovering as we go. Because the situation we live right now has never happened before. There's no rule book. These are the 3 steps to, I will give you 3 steps later, but there are no 3 steps to. It's more of a mindset that you need to build to be in a position to have your team be the best you can be, and creating this culture of success around this, as opposed to the fear of failure, which is currently the strong point. But great questions. So hopefully I'm going to address a few of those now in the second part, but definitely let's continue the conversation and make sure that we get all these points out, well, all of them in this short time, if we all them anyway.
Thank
you. So best for the world. Again, this may help the leaders to make the shift if it's still necessary. Being best for the world is not just a nice to have, it's actually, there's a return. And there's, again, this great article on Forbes about the return of investment of purpose, which has financial returns, brand equity returns, employee engagement returns. I mean, it's like a no-brainer that if you put purpose intelligently at the center of your organization will be much, much better. The problem is, it's usually just like CSR, just a top layer. It does not go deep enough to actually have the difference and make the difference that's really necessary. But the ROI of purpose, link is there, go and read it. It's just a really beautiful visual of how many layers that this can bring in. But from a B Corp experience, and I speak of B Corps simply because I'm involved in the B Corp movements. I know many of you are, but there's some great companies which are not B Corps. It's just that it's easier to measure because they're all part of one group. But there's, again, do not think that B Corp is the only thing. It happens to be quite a powerful movement of companies, but there's many other great companies. So I just, because I know, but think of in a broader sense. So for B Corps, most of them, 75%, have a 9 out of 10 brand rank. So this, if anybody's in marketing, that's a dream. You know, that's dream world. Paradise is 9 out of 10 brand rank. And because these companies are activist, motivated, motivating, and purpose-driven, they've got such a high branding, which means their marketing costs are very small. Their customers do the marketing for them. Their suppliers sometimes do the marketing for them because they're such great, beautiful companies, imperfect, but great, that people drive them forward. I mentioned before the WhatsApps of Danone employee, they all have their Danone message there. So when they speak to their friends, they're publicizing the company. How many of other companies are proudly showing the logo of their company on their personal WhatsApp, right? So this is a sign of how strong and powerful this is. And on average, B Corp sales have grown 3 times as much as anybody else in the market. So, I mean, it's pretty straightforward stuff that if you look after your people, your providers and so forth, and you have you're a bright businessman or businesswoman, you will definitely have a better 3 times more sales. So that's resting there. Plus the investments. We've seen a wave of impact investing now starting. Some is what they call, not greenwashing, impact washing. So something, but it's not really true. But there is a huge trend towards this, and purpose-driven companies that have measured their purpose are receiving investments like before. So great, it's so obvious. So why doesn't everybody make the transition to purpose-driven companies? And I'll show you one example, which is a very clear one. So if we ask anybody here and anybody in your company and anybody of your friends who wants change, everybody will put their hands up. But who wants to change, that's where things get stuck. And I think in Poland at the moment, there's a very strong movement because change has been created without the wish of the general people. And then there's everybody, oh, this should change, this should or should not change, and so forth. But actual people changing themselves psychologically, and I'm sure there's some wonderful psychologists that can explain this to me, is really, really hard. So this is a simple reason why this doesn't happen. So how can we transition to put purpose at the center of this business model, especially in these uncertain times? Uncertainty is the key element. Interesting enough, my kids are born in uncertainty, so all they see is exactly that. And so we'll have new generation that says this is the new normal, unfortunately. For us, especially for the older people like me, uncertainty is not something we enjoy that much. We were not used to it, so now we need to adapt to it. So first, address this human reticence to change. So as a leader, as a person, and when I say leader, you can be leading 2 people, 3 people, 5,000, 2 million people, but all of us, each of us is a leader. So do not get out of the picture, stay in the picture as a leader. And how can we address this reticence to change and move from change as a threat to change as a natural way of being? Okay, so this is where we need to really think through and make people feel comfortable with this and make it a natural, and I said natural way of being, not the new way of being. It's just a new natural. So you need to think through what makes people feel not relaxing, maybe not the right word, but serene, at peace, happy with, embracing it, feeling they're not alone. So there's many elements which really can move this forward. And maybe change is not the right word. Maybe instead of change, we can use another word that actually works. Evolution, transition, improvement, because people are so reticent to this word. We also need to be clever in how we address, there's a new change process. Oh God, not another change process, but we're going to make the world better. Oh, that sounds better. So really think through the terminology, the way we are addressing this and approaching this in a different way. And to help this, I offer you 3 useful shortcuts. I know that everybody talks about resilience and adaptability. I've got 3 other ones that maybe are not mentioned so often that hopefully are helpful as we move forward and I have this going forward. The first one is warmth. The second one is trust. And the third one is letting go of control. So you may say, warmth? That sounds kind of odd. And what I mean by warmth is developing empathy. What I mean by trust is to reduce uncertainty. What I mean of letting go of control is to become super collaborators. So these are not mentioned very often, but these are shortcuts, let's call them shortcuts, which I have found are very powerful in killing the permafrost or melting the permafrost, in creating these united teams, in going forward. It's not an easy recipe where I say I do 1, 2, and 3 and everything changes. We need to be leaders. We need to express and be really good or develop the capacity to do this. And very important, we may not be very warm people, or hopefully we are trustworthy people. Maybe we're not so good at letting go of control. So do not feel that we have a responsibility. We set an example, but we can find the right people. So a team is made up not of one person, but of a number of people. So if you're missing warmth in your team, find someone that can create empathy. So it's not all on your shoulders to be the perfect leader, but it is up on your shoulders to find the perfect team that fits with these elements. So never alone, together with the right people that bring the right kind of light going forward. So let's go in a bit of detail into these three elements. The first one I said is warmth. And this is where I repeat, uncertainty. People in the streets right now protesting. In the US, my God, what's going to happen next? In Spain, they're protesting. In Chile, they're protesting, and they're fighting and burning down metro stations. So there's a real lack of warmth, and there's a real uncertainty. Really, the word is fear, is anxiety, is rage, is nobody's listening to me. And that's the main reason why these things are happening, is nobody's listening to me. Nobody's understanding how I feel. Nobody sees what is going on. What is interesting is that with this lockdown situation, we used to go in offices, right? And who are offices created by? Not by me or by you. It's a place which has been created by an architect or somebody else, and I just go there. So it's quite easy to lose yourself because the place where you are physically is not built by yourself. And now, we're all calling, most of us, from our homes. They may be better or worse places, but we created our homes. So already our conversations are slightly different, because it's a cat that just went through the screen, or a child's crying, or something else happening. There's already something different in the dialogues. Interesting enough, you remember where the CEO used to be seated, or the woman CEO? She was on the 10th floor. Remember that floor where everything smells wonderful, where there's no noise, where you feel a bit of anxiety when you walk up at the and knock on the door? That special place that you sometimes reach. Right now, your CEO, the female leader of your company, she's one of 20 or 50 Zoom windows up on the side. So that's a totally different hierarchical situation that has arisen, that started with this lockdown. So that's one key element. Find a way to be warm and to develop empathy. And here there's Ernst and Young. See, they're all saying the same things. This is in Spanish, so I think Daniel from Cadiz, he will know exactly what I'm writing here, nobody else. But you can see the highlights here is listening. The highlight is to give a sense of purpose, to be resilient, and to communicate with clarity. So there's a full report, is really interesting, for just in Spanish. I'm sure they have an English version, about the new kind of leadership that creates what is important, but especially focuses on people and relationship with people. And guess what? I think we've all seen these articles all over the place. So I think in case anybody had any doubts, this is the era for feminine leadership. Because women, and I'm generalizing a little bit, but women really have a different capacity to dialogue and to have empathy, which is so fundamental now. So this is the cover page from The Economist 2005. And this is the evolution of mankind. Maybe the image of the woman they chose is very 2005. In 2020, I don't think they would use that, but definitely they see how the evolution of humankind has women now at the center. Because generally speaking, I'm generalizing again, but it is a trait. Women have better intuition. You have no idea about the future. I would like somebody with intuition there. They're multitasking. They've got this ability to dialogue in a deeper, more empathic. I mean, men usually talk about politics, about are you Barca or Real Madrid fan? I'm not sure what the key teams are in Poland, but women really have much more meaningful dialogues. And men say, what a waste of time very often. But these are the dialogues that really go to the core of the human being. They're more empathy, they're more adaptable. So to me, that's a key element. If you want to have a shortcut to success, make sure you have as many women as possible in your teams. At least have a balance. So all women, I'm not sure if it will definitely be better than having board of directors with all men. My sense is the balance of the two is really where things work well. Interesting enough, data from B Corps, 63% of founders or members of the board of directors of B Corps are women. Again, I think there is a connection between the success of these B Corps and the female-led thing going forward. Again, McKinsey, I love it how I'm using all these lovely McKinsey quotes. The role of the leader is, first, to inspire creative thinking about what makes you unique, how it links to purpose, and why it could be valuable, and then encourage rigor in embedding into your company's core. So this is the thinking that we never have time for even it goes into creative thinking that really happens when you have this trust, this moment where people really trust each other. I'll give you one case, which I thought was quite interesting in this trust setting situation. So this is a B Corp. So I'm going to mention a few of these, which is called Oxvelte. You can see here, and the article again was in Forbes. So what this company does is food, healthy food, very nice, very healthy food for offices. So that was their focus. They bring it to offices, healthy foods. Guess what? Lockdown, nobody goes into offices. Oh my God, what do we do now? So what would we do is usually, especially in a male-led company, the board of directors sits in the room creatively through what can we do when we go forward? Oh, let's do this, let's do that. I don't know. This woman actually did something different and went to the why in the middle of a crisis. So instead of taking action, said, okay, stop everything. We have now a big problem, a huge problem. So who are we? Before we take any action, who are we now? Who should we develop? So Jesse Gold is the CEO of this company. She brought the whole full team together and they developed a new mission. That really sounds counterintuitive. In the middle of the crisis, think of a new mission instead of surviving and fighting for the business. But that's a feminine, I would say, way of doing it. You know, take your time, pause, rethink who you are, and then from there build back stronger. And they created this statement, which is a bit scrappy. I can see this has not been edited by a marketing guru. It says, amid a historic pandemic and panic, a small but scrappy B Corp breaks barriers to feed an isolated workforce and vulnerable communities with Oxford's honestly sustainable food. So you can see these people came together and said, this is our new vision. And with this new mission and vision, they said, okay, now we can rethink and pivot a company. And now they're actually very successful, but they're delivering to the vulnerable communities and to isolated workforce members. So they've just shifted the model, but first they rethought who they are and their essence. So that's where purpose-driven companies are. They pivot much faster and much better because of this trust of being together, and they're more resilient and adaptive and trusted. So again, this is the how we can bring purpose in very difficult times. And this is the trust that reduces the uncertainty. I repeat, uncertainty or reducing uncertainty is really a key driver of success, and trust does actually do that. Now, how do you build trust? I think everybody says adaptive. You need to be adaptive. You need to change. You need to shift. I see this, I see that, which is great, unless you drive all your people crazy. Because if you keep being adaptive, you know how these things work. Now you blow on them and they turn around like crazy. I don't really trust this. I don't really feel comfortable with that. If we change every 30 seconds, every time something happens, it may sound as if we're adaptive, but actually we are destroying the whole business, destroying what happens next. So people just in the end just sit and wait, okay, what next? Without really engaging in it. So to me, a much more interesting element is adaptive focus. So yes, I think this metaphor is quite a good one. These things sit on churches, usually on churches, interesting enough, or big buildings, and they sign where the wind comes from or goes. And then actually where it comes from? No, where it goes, right? They indicate where the wind goes, good, the direction, the trend. These do not turn around every 30 seconds. These are focused on a trend for any given time until the wind changes, and then they focus in that new wind. So as leaders, I would encourage all of us to really think of not continuously adapting, but this adaptive focus that changes with the trend, sticks with it for long enough, then stops, have the conversation to reflect, and then get into action and just move forward. That is what creates certainty, not continuous adaptability and continuous change. And now I'll share the third, and I hope you're still with me on this, all this information and sharing this monologue, and then we have a couple of questions. Letting go of control and becoming super collaborators. And that, especially for your average alpha male director, is really counterintuitive. And also remember this, so you see this scale of people, and you may be a leader and you decide, and you're up there or up there, and you're really motivated because you took the decision, and it's a great decision, we're going to be more sustainable and so forth. But these people here they're not as engaged or as motivated. So even though your decision is great, there's a lack of motivation down there. So those who decide are the most motivated. So intuitively, how do I get everybody motivated? Let everybody decide. And let everybody decide because also, not just for motivation, is that things are changing around us so fast that this lady down here may actually have the solution for what's required now and be the fastest to implement it. So if this lady has an idea and then she goes to go all the way up here to get the approval, and then there's a conversation, and then something else comes down there, boom, the opportunity is gone. So this ability, and it's the toughest one to do, to let go of control and to really give control to every single person. And giving control is not saying, okay, from now on, everybody takes decisions, because that would destroy any company, is to elevate the ability of each one of these human beings to really be the best decision makers. So first is giving them the capacity and then going forward. I had an interesting story of, we tried holacracy in EBBF, which is one of the organizations where I work. Holacracy is basically where there's a list up on the table, or in our case was on an online platform, and anybody can do what they want. And it's really interesting because you think it's empowering, you're letting everybody decide what they want to do. But so many people were stuck because they were waiting for permission. They were waiting for, is this more important or that important? And they were not taking up any tasks because of this fear. So it's not just about diffusing leadership per se, it's about really giving each person the ability and the capacity to take the decisions, to feel trusted that even if they will make mistakes, which they will do, nothing really, well, something will happen and so forth. And about mistakes, I've got one practical example that happened to me. So in the many ways I try to save the world, I also co-founded this place called the Impact Hub Madrid. These are co-creation spaces. There are co-working spaces. Now there's 5 of them in Madrid. It's a global network, the Impact Hubs, and social innovation happens there. So to cut a long story short, the founders, 8 of us, again, one was an expert finance, one is a community finance expert, was a communication. So they're not single experts, but lots of experts for men and for women. So we, as you know, when you create a company, you're doing absolutely everything from sweeping the floor to putting the caps in a place, to setting up the computers, you do everything. Then things go well, you start to have an operational team. So you have your baby there, you created your company with great passion, with great values, with great drive, and then you got these other people who are operational people that, guess what, sometimes they do not see things your way and they make mistakes. So what do you do there? Do you let them? Do you not let them? You tell them what should be done? Don't you tell them? So that's one of the dilemmas we had. And we came to the decision, okay, if it's a really big mistake, then say, hold on, let's have a chat. Otherwise, we just let them do mistakes and just say, oh my God, no, but not saying anything. And they realize, oops, this doesn't work. Maybe I can change something. And that's when the team decided to say, this is my Impact Hub. I do not have the founders telling me what I should do. I have the space to make my mistakes, to grow, to understand, to learn, and to then be better. So I know it works because I tried it and I see what the consequences of that are. And this collaboration, I think it's kind of interesting, and this is definitely not B Corp. I mentioned to you, Nike, I'm sure it's a great company, but it's not a B Corp. But they have influence, no? And one campaign that they run in the Black Lives Matter moment, which hopefully will continue forever, was they said this campaign, which is just do it. The campaign was all about, for once, do not do it. Do not be anti-racist and so forth. But this is not the news. The news is what Adidas did. So Adidas, the main competitor of Nike, on their tweet, they say, together is how we move forward. Together is how we make change. And they mention Nike's thing going forward. So this is the new collaborative mindset that's emerging in the biggest competitors. Allow me to give you another very non-B Corp movement, Burger King and McDonald's. So this is the latest. This was sent out, I think, a week or 2 ago. At Burger King, they sent out a campaign to the world saying, please order from McDonald's. So Burger King saying, please order from McDonald's. What's going on? And they said, we never thought we'd be asking you to do this, just like we never thought we would encourage you to order from our competitors, but let's help all of us and to help the thousands of staff that really need your support and so forth. So we see that it's a unique moment. I would not say it's a great moment, but it is a unique moment in which things are changing, mindsets are changing. So the key questions that I have for you is, do you relinquish control? Are you a super collaborator, or can you become one? And are you able to diffuse your leadership? And so I'm curious to hear your answers or your questions to these points that I'm sharing. And there's no good or bad thing. Is it possible in big organizations or companies that are not based on on team management? Yeah, Anna, that's up to us. The key point is, let's not be followers, let's be leaders. And by leaders, I don't mean kamikaze leaders that go and kill themselves and their career and everything else. Is finding, what I find works best is never doing things on your own, but finding like-minded people in a group. And how do you find like-minded people? Is through conversations. So for example, a few years ago, Peter Hindle, I think was his name, was the director of communication at Procter & Gamble. And he happened to be an ordained priest, which he did not mention the company at all, but obviously he had spiritual values because he was a Protestant priest, but he was director of communication at Procter & Gamble. And one evening, he had a conversation with other people and said, you know what, I'm a priest. Oh, instead of being shock horror, the next person, another director said, oh, I'm a believing Buddhist. And the other one talked about their spiritual beliefs. So all of a sudden, through this conversation, which they never had, and they were side by side in the office, just because it was an outing, they shared their inner being. And through that conversation, they created an ethics committee at Procter & Gamble. And they would take, whenever there was a difficult decision to make, they would create this meetup and actually do that. So to me, it's kind of fascinating how many opportunities we have around us in these apparently horrible companies made up of horrible people, that actually they're human beings. And we never have those conversations that allow that understanding to actually arise. And Carolina reminds us to join the Q&A after the class is completed, which I think in 10 minutes. So we have 10 more minutes. Nadia.
Yes, Danielle. Thank you so much for this. And I was just writing down again your three, warm, trust, and let go of control, which I actually find fundamental. And the question that comes to mind, because when I thought trust, I was thinking a safe space. But then you're saying that trust is to reduce uncertainty. And from experience and also just from what we probably have all read, and when we create a safe space, you encourage empathy and you encourage collaboration, because and it's related to trust. So I just wonder how I just don't feel that they are necessarily unrelated, and that if we create a safe space, a new culture that is based on empathy, collaboration, the way you did when you created your hub, when you let people fail, when they were not punished and judged, and they could in fact create, and it's okay if they fail, then there is no fear of uncertainty. I mean, I just don't think that uncertainty is new. I think it's part of our life. Maybe it is more, there's more of it now, but so I would just, what do you think about creating safe space? In fact, even for the leaders that are so afraid to lead more in this B Corp movement or any other movement that's going to take us closer to the new normal.
And I think Poland is leading in that. So for example, your protest, I do not have the full understanding, but they're generally very humorous, creative, beautiful, supportive. They don't have guns, they do not throwing things. It's a mindset that you have in Poland that I wish that more people around the world actually had. So you start with a positive area, which is a mindset that allows, that's more understanding, more loving than the controversial rest of the world. So that's one positive that you have over the rest of the world. And the other element is the element of fear. So I really, if anything sticks in your mind, just remember that decision makers often work on fear. Fear of being fired, fear of being judged, fear of being, so exactly as you say, Nadia, the ability of moving from fear to It's not all hugging each other and singing, haha, happy, peace, and love. That's not what we mean. What we mean is addressing that fear. What are you fearing? What is it? And then showing them cases. And luckily, be the B Corp movements, be other amazing companies, there's every day more cases that other business model actually works. So, you don't need the McKinsey, or even the McKinsey says so. I mean, now it's like, it's not as if, oh, I think so. Oh, you're such an idealist. Okay, McKinsey, Ernst & Young, and I've got tons of these articles if you need them. So it's really, it's obvious, but still it's hard. So even my example in the Impact Hub, I'm now talking about it very relaxed. It was not relaxed. Say, oh my God, what are they doing? Oh, and you felt, no, I must stop. So it's really tough. But then because there were 8 of us and we all helped each other as well, so it was a strong team, obviously a budget-driven team, it was easier. How would you create that comfortable place, Nadia? How would you do it?
I think I would lead from vulnerability, and just, it's again showing the example. Then people will relax. If I allow myself to fail and to show that I'm a learner, people will feel more comfortable to know that it's okay not to know everything from the get-go. We're not experts in this space anyway. In fact, all we have to do is just to let go of that. Oh, if it's not perfect and if it's not certain, then I get stuck. We cannot afford to get stuck. And so I would just invite everybody to be like, okay, we are in this creative space. We have to take action. That's one thing we know. And we have to be empathetic and we have to do it together. So I'm not a solo dancer. I'm not a solo leader. We're all in this together. And I think I would just let go of judgment also. So the control and the judgment creates a safe space and allow people to get the best out of them. Everybody has to step up.
So the answer, Nadia, is to ask the question to more Nadias in the company, because there's lots of Nadias that have all the answers. So you need the experts, you need the alpha male, you need to just ask a Nadia.
I don't have an answer, but
amazing how few people ask Nadias, and it's so stupid. It's like, you got a Ferrari and you just drive it in first gear all the time, and I take all the decisions in first gear. You got the second, third, fourth, and sixth gear, and lots of Nadias that can actually create you and you really fast, but somehow you don't trust it. So Nadia has to educate, well, you are a leader, but you can educate some of the CEOs, and CEOs can, and this reciprocity, this safety is really first. And I love Randall's question about a set of measures for measuring warmth, trust, and letting go of control. And that's one of the big issues. So that's the genius of the B Corp founders. They put a number to how good a company you are. But in these 3 areas, there's no numbers. And leaders love numbers. Say, okay, I'm doing better than before. So that's one of the reasons why it's so difficult. And maybe, Randall, you do have some, or somebody has some indicators and some measures, but by not having these indicators, it's harder to see the progress, and therefore it's harder to invest in them. Randall, I ask you, you might have, Nadia. Nadia's out of control now. She's
no, I'm just one. It's just a thought that I had, because I think everybody's talking about well-being and becoming at the center, and in fact, even to measure a nation's performance. And I wonder if how warmth, trust, and letting go of control can be part of that. So they're not direct indicators. They can be proxy indicators. That's actually, where empathy is definitely part of well-being. So that was my only thought. I don't have an answer, but just to connect the dots.
Thank you, Randall.
Yeah, thanks. I fully agree with you that having facts in decision making and putting the numbers on the wall and making sure they're visible and findable and usable are all great elements, and that's in fact what the impact assessment, great benefit of that. And I think that there is a lot of fragmented work being done in that space, and well-being and resilience and so forth, diagnostics on various themes, but they aren't yet brought into the B Corp house as much as the B impact assessment is. And it seems to me there should be a call for a next round of detailing in the very direction you've described to bring it into the B Corp house, is my thought.
To me, it's not, and again, B Corp to me is where I live, my family, but I love the world, Truran. So there's just, so to speak, I think 4,500 B Corps, and there's quite a few million companies. So I would actually love to go broadly and just say, because this is the key element for change for good, which is empathy, this trust, and so forth, we really should be focusing some efforts into that. I mean, we've got people on the moon, we got all these crazy things, so we can get people to fly. We are pretty clever. So if we're clever, let's then prove that and just create the kind of elements and test and explore and experiment. So I think people are fearful of perfection. Everything has to be tested and guaranteed, otherwise you will be judged. I'll judge you. Let's just create these indicators. Let's create these methods of going forward and play with it. I'm a big, so at the BBF events, we always say at the end what we want to do. We do not want any to-do lists. We do not want any commitments. What we want is a joy of experimenting. So we say, okay, what might you experiment with next? An experiment is the key word. It's not a plan or strategy, right? It's an experiment. And right now, when the uncertainty is so high, experimenting becomes a must, and also something very dangerous, because experimenting, hey, this is serious. We're going to just play with things, but playing with experimenting is what will allow you to actually be going forward. And building the future is that kind of sense. So if I think of Facebook, did they adapt? Zoom, did they adapt? None of them adapted. They created the future. So to me, that's a kind of mindset where being resilient, because that keeps you there. You're just wanting to build the future, and you do it through really empowered, crazy ideas that go forward, and a clever business sense that actually supports it. So you cannot just be creatively out there. You need both, and that's where, to me, the balance really is so important of the values, the drive, and the purpose with very good business sense. Because the reason why so many social enterprises fail is not because they're social or useful for society. It's because they're really hopeless entrepreneurs getting there. Idealists who have an idea and they set up the company. They don't have a clue how to run a company or how to manage it. So it's not that social entrepreneurship or values-driven entrepreneurship doesn't work. Is that if two amazing female entrepreneurs do the same thing, one is a social entrepreneur, one is a traditional entrepreneur, the social entrepreneur will always, always, always be better, 3 times better at least. So to me, is the ability to match the two that really goes forward. And as we are closing, I have a final, very quick summary and quote for you to leave you with that, hopefully, motivation going forward. So what do we do today about purpose into the business model of your company? We shared how being the best for the world is a way forward. We shared one case, the Danone, and how it actually touched on the 5 verticals of the B impact assessment. And this return on purpose that really is a clear evidence of how that is the way forward. And we said the shortcuts could be warmth that creates empathy, trust that reduces uncertainty, and letting go of control and becoming super collaborators. And the last quote is from a fantastic millennial. I'm afraid I'm not very creative here, but I love his phrase so much I keep using it. And Peter Drucker is, again, profit for a company is like oxygen for a person. If you do not have enough of it, you're out of the game. So again, my personal idea is profit is not bad, it's great, it's fantastic, it's like oxygen for a person. You need it, it's not an extra thing to think about. But if you think your life is about breathing, you're really missing out on something. So I hope that our companies, our lives will not just be about breathing, there'll be other elements beyond that that really make it worthwhile. Thank you very much.